Jenna and Mark have long dreamed of an escape from civilization. Their life in bustling Phoenix, with its perpetual traffic jams, office walls, and flickering screens, had long since become routine. When it came time for their third vacation together, they chose not beaches or tourist attractions, but the wild, untouched trails of the Apache National Forest. "It's quiet. There's real air," Jenna said, unfolding the map in front of Mark. He nodded. They both loved nature, but this time was special. Mark had just gotten over a layoff, and Jenna had just gotten over a breakup with her family. The woods seemed like the perfect place to reboot. One sunny, warm day, they decided to go on a road trip. Packed their gear into their pickup truck and hit the road. They stopped in the small town of Payson to buy some last-minute supplies. At a store called Mountain Trails, an elderly salesman with a gray mustache looked over their gear and smiled. "Getting out to the Mogollon Ridge?" "Yes, we're thinking of following the trail at Black Cliff," Mark replied. The salesman stood still for a moment, then slowly handed them the map. "Be careful. Those places are not all that easy." "Bears?" Jenna smiled. "Worse," he lowered his voice. "There's something out there that doesn't like visitors. Some tourists don't come back." Mark laughed. "You mean the Mogollon monster? We read those legends for tourists." The salesman didn't argue. He only sighed and wished good luck. The day was perfect. They drove to the edge of the forest, left their car on the side of the road, grabbed their gear and hit the road. The sun, not yet at its zenith, softly illuminated the trail among the centuries-old pines. The air was filled with the scent of pine needles and damp earth from the recent rain. Jenna walked ahead, turning occasionally to make sure Mark was keeping up. He walked more slowly, scrutinizing the map and checking his compass. "Look at this place!" Jenna exclaimed, stopping in a small clearing. Before them was a view of a deep canyon covered with dense forest. A stream gurgled among the rocks below, its water glistening in the sunlight. "Do you think we could camp there?" Mark asked, pointing to a level spot at the foot of the cliff. "Perfect," Jenna smiled. They walked down to the creek, gathering dry branches for the fire on the way. The forest seemed alive with squirrels jumping from branch to branch, a woodpecker chirping in the distance, and fallen leaves rustling underfoot. They made camp. Toward evening, however, everything changed. Jenna was the first to notice that something was wrong. She was sitting by the creek, filtering water, when she suddenly realized that the birds had stopped singing. Not just silent for a moment, they were completely silent. "Mark!" She turned around. He stood by the fire and, frozen, he began to listen. The silence was unnatural. Not the chirping of crickets, not a rustle of leaves. Even the wind, which had been stirring the treetops an hour ago, was now gone. It was as if the forest was holding its breath. "What the hell?" Mark whispered. Jenna felt a chill run down her spine. She looked up and saw a squirrel frozen on a pine branch. The animal didn't move. He was watching, not at them, but through them, deep into the forest, frozen in an unnatural pose, as if it had seen something terrible. "Maybe there's a predator nearby." Jenna lowered her voice to a whisper. Mark slowly reached for the knife hanging on his belt. "Bears are usually noisy." Darkness fell quickly, and the forest fell into total darkness. Not even the moon was visible. Dense clouds covered the sky. Jenna sat by the fire, wrapped in her jacket. "We should get some wood," Mark muttered, but didn't move. They both heard footsteps. Heavy, slow. Someone was walking around the camp. "It's not a deer," Jenna whispered. "Deer don't walk so measuredly, and they don't stop as if listening." Mark grabbed the flashlight and pointed the beam sharply in the direction of the sound. The light slid down the tree trunks, illuminated the bushes, and for a moment it illuminated some dark figure, tall, too tall, with unnaturally long arms hanging almost to the ground. "God!" Jenna blurted out. The figure darted away, disappearing into the darkness. However, they knew it was still there, and it was watching. In the morning, Mark said they were leaving. "We're not waiting for it to decide to eat us," he said, quickly packing his backpack. They didn't even bother packing the tent, deciding to leave the extra weight behind. They put out the fire, gathered all the necessary things, and set off on their return journey. Out on the back road, but decided to take a shortcut back. They turned off the trail, trying to go directly to the exit of the forest. However, it was as if the forest was resisting them. The compass was spinning madly. The GPS was only showing an error. And then there was a scream. It was shrill, inhuman, filled with such rage that Jenna felt goosebumps run down her spine. "It wasn't a bear, and it wasn't a cougar," Mark muttered. The scream was repeated, closer, even closer to them. They ran, and the ground beneath their feet suddenly collapsed. Mark and Jenna felt the ground go out from under their feet, and they fell down. It was a huge ravine that they both fell into. Jenna hits her head on a rock, and the world went foggy. Mark fell about 3 feet away from her. The last thing she saw before she passed out was Mark. He was holding on to his leg. Mark could not move. His leg was broken. Jenna was unconscious in a puddle in a deep, steep ravine. Mark realized that without help, they would just die here. Evening had come. In the silence, Mark heard the sound of approaching footsteps. They were like the footsteps near the camp, the same, heavy and slow. Mark squeezed his eyes shut. Then there was the scrape of claws on stone. He opened his eyes. There it stood before him, almost 3 meters tall, covered in black, matted wool, with long, unnaturally curved arms, and eyes as red as embers. The monster leaned over Jenna. Mark wanted to scream, to lunge at it, but his body wouldn't listen. The creature gently touched her wound, then plucked a root from the ground, kneaded it in its paws, and rubbed it into the wound. Then it turned to Mark. Their eyes met. There was no malice in those eyes, only deep, ancient sorrow. In the morning, rescue workers found them. "You're miraculously alive," one of them said, examining Jenna. "This wound, it's already healing. It's like it's been a week, not a night." Mark was silent. On the way back, the rescuer showed him the tracks by the ravine. "Someone had carried you and Jenna through the woods. And these prints..." He shook his head. "They're not human. You weren't carried out of the ravine by a human. You can consider someone saved you from certain death today." Jenna woke up in the hospital. The doctors couldn't explain why her wound wasn't infected, why it healed so quickly. They wouldn't tell her about the monster. However, a month later, while sorting through photos, Mark found one shot, a random shot taken at dusk. In the background, between the trees, 2 red eyes could be seen, looking right at them. They never went back to Arizona again. Sometimes, however, waking up in the night, Jenna would stare into the darkness and whisper, "He didn't mean to destroy us. He saved us." Why? Maybe the monster wasn't protecting them from themselves. It was protecting them from something else. Something that lurks deep in the forest. Something that even he, ancient, wild, forgotten, fears.